The thunder came like artillery fire across the Montana plains, each boom shaking the earth beneath 15-year-old Elias Webb's bare feet. He'd been sleeping in the hayloft of Crawford Ranch's old barn, the one they used for storage now that the new stable housed their valuable horses. Rain hammered the roof like 1,000 angry fists, and through gaps in the weathered wood, Elias could see lightning turning night into brief, terrifying day. He shouldn't be here. Trespassing on Thomas Crawford's land was dangerous. The rancher was known throughout the territory as a hard man who protected his property with dogs, guns, and a temper that matched the storm outside. But Elias had been wandering for 3 weeks since leaving the orphanage in Helena, and exhaustion had overruled caution. The old barn had seemed abandoned enough to risk. Now, listening to the storm's fury, Elias was grateful for even this drafty shelter. He pulled the thin blanket he'd stolen from a clothesline tighter around his shoulders and tried to sleep despite the noise. Then he heard something that made his blood freeze. A scream. Not human, but animal. A horse, terrified and in pain, coming from the direction of the new stable. Elias sat up, every survival instinct telling him to stay put, stay hidden. Whatever was happening wasn't his problem. He was a ghost here, invisible, and ghosts didn't get involved. But the scream came again, so full of terror that Elias felt it in his chest. He'd always had a way with animals. At the orphanage, he'd been the only one who could calm the temperamental mule they used for deliveries. Horses seemed to sense something in him, some quietness that put them at ease. It was his only real talent in a world that valued strength and charm, neither of which he possessed. The screaming continued, joined now by crashing sounds. Wood splintering, metal banging. Something was very wrong. Elias climbed down from the loft and pushed open the barn door. Rain hit him like a wall, instantly soaking his threadbare clothes. Lightning flashed, illuminating the main stable 200 yards away. One of the large doors hung at an angle, partially ripped from its hinges. He ran, his feet splashing through mud, rain blinding him. As he got closer, he could hear the chaos inside. Multiple horses panicking, their fear feeding on itself. When lightning flashed again, Elias saw the problem. The storm had torn part of the roof away. Rain poured through the gap, and wind howled through the stable like a living thing. But worse, a massive oak branch had crashed through the opening, landing in the center aisle. It had crushed one of the stall doors, and the horse inside, a magnificent black stallion, was trapped. The branch blocked most of the stall opening, and the horse was caught between it and the back wall, screaming and thrashing as it tried to escape. The other horses, 6 of them in nearby stalls, were panicking in response. They kicked their doors, reared, crashed against walls. The entire stable felt like it might explode with equine terror. Elias knew he should get help, find the ranch hands, wake the main house. But the stallion's eyes, white-rimmed with fear, caught his. The animal was going to hurt itself badly if it kept thrashing. Might even break a leg, and a horse with a broken leg was a dead horse. Moving on instinct more than thought, Elias approached the stall. The stallion saw him and screamed again, trying to rear in the confined space. "Easy," Elias said softly, barely audible over the storm. "Easy, boy, I'm here to help." He knew the horse couldn't understand his words, but tone mattered, energy mattered. Elias kept his body loose, unthreatening as he assessed the situation. The oak branch was huge, probably 3 feet in diameter. He couldn't move it alone, but he could see that it hadn't actually crushed the stall door, just wedged against it, bending it inward. If he could somehow shift the branch or remove the door, the horse might squeeze through. Other stall doors were opening now. The panicked horses had kicked hard enough to break latches. They were loose in the main aisle, adding to the chaos. One, a grey mare, charged past Elias toward the damaged main door, escaping into the storm. Others milled around, confused and terrified. "Focus on the stallion," Elias told himself. "The others could be rounded up later. This one was trapped and in immediate danger." He grabbed a rope from a peg on the wall and approached the stall again. The stallion's eyes rolled, showing white. It tried to kick, but the confined space limited its movement. Elias could see blood on its haunches where it had scraped against the splintered door. "I know you're scared," Elias said, keeping his voice steady and low. "I know everything's wrong, but I need you to trust me. Just for a minute. Just long enough." He'd seen the ranch hands use ropes to control difficult horses, wasn't sure he could do it himself, had never been formally taught. But desperation made him brave. He fashioned a loop and, moving slowly, incredibly slowly, extended it toward the stallion's head. The horse jerked back, slamming into the wall. Elias waited, rope still extended, not moving. Patience. Animals responded to patience and calm. After what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, the stallion stilled slightly, its sides heaving. "That's it," Elias murmured. "That's good. I'm not going to hurt you. Promise." He stepped closer. The stallion's ears flicked forward, focusing on him. Elias could feel the moment of decision, the animal weighing whether this human was threat or salvation. Then, miraculously, the horse lowered its head slightly. Just enough. Elias slipped the rope over its neck, securing it gently. Now came the hard part. He needed to somehow shift that massive branch or find another way to widen the opening. He examined the stall door more carefully. The top hinge had broken when the branch hit. If he could remove the bottom hinge, the whole door might swing away, creating enough space. He searched frantically for tools, finding a rusted pry bar near a workbench. The other horses swirled around him, but Elias blocked them out, focusing entirely on the trapped stallion. He wedged the pry bar under the bottom hinge and pulled with all his strength. Nothing. The hinge was old, but solid. Elias braced his foot against the stall wall and pulled again, putting his entire body weight into it. The metal groaned. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." With a shriek of tortured metal, the hinge broke free. The door immediately sagged, held only by the pressure of the branch. Elias grabbed it and pulled, muscles screaming. The door shifted, swung outward slightly. Not much, but maybe enough. "Boy," he said to the stallion, "this is your chance. Come on. Follow me." He tugged gently on the rope, backing toward the narrow opening he'd created. The stallion hesitated, eye still showing fear. But Elias kept his energy calm, inviting rather than demanding. "Come on! You can do it! Trust me!" The horse took one tentative step forward, then another. Its shoulder scraped against the branch, and it nearly panicked again. But Elias kept talking, kept pulling gently. The animal squeezed through the gap, scraping its sides, leaving blood on the splintered wood. But it was through. Free. The stallion immediately tried to bolt, but Elias held the rope firm. "Not yet. Let me check you first." The horse trembled, adrenaline coursing through it, but allowed Elias to run his hands over its body. Scrapes and cuts, some deep, but nothing broken. The leg seemed sound. It would need treatment, but it would live. Only then did Elias realize he wasn't alone. A man stood in the damaged doorway, rain pouring off his hat, a rifle in his hands. Behind him, 3 ranch hands with lanterns. They'd been watching. The man was Thomas Crawford, Elias realized with sinking dread. The owner himself. He was tall and weathered, maybe 50 years old, with eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes were fixed on Elias now, with an expression the boy couldn't read. "That's Midnight," Crawford said, his voice cutting through the storm. "My prize stallion. Worth more than you'll see in 10 lifetimes, and you're trespassing on my land." Elias's hand tightened on the rope. "Yes, sir. I was sleeping in the old barn. Heard the horse screaming. I just wanted to help. You could have been killed. That branch weighs half a ton. If it had shifted while you were in there, you'd be crushed." "Yes, sir." Crawford approached slowly, taking in the scene. The other horses milling loose, the destroyed stall, the massive branch, and his valuable stallion, bleeding but alive, held by a soaking wet boy who looked half-starved. What's your name? Elias Webb. I'm nobody, sir. I'll leave right now if you want. Just let me help get these other horses secured first. They're scared. Crawford studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. Help my men round them up, then we'll talk. Boys, get those horses back in undamaged stalls. And someone ride for Doc Patterson. Midnight needs attention. The next hour was chaos. Elias helped catch the loose horses, speaking softly to each one, calming them with that strange gift he had. The ranch hands watched with grudging respect as the skinny orphan boy managed horses they were struggling to control. One by one, the animals were secured in safe stalls in another barn. Finally, only Midnight remained, still held by Elias's rope. The stallion had calmed considerably, standing quietly despite his injuries. Crawford approached and extended his hand for the rope. Elias hesitated, then surrendered it. "He's a good horse," Elias said. "Smart." He knew I was trying to help. Crawford ran expert hands over the stallion, checking injuries. "You did well. Most grown men wouldn't have had the courage or the sense to handle this the way you did. Where'd you learn about horses?" "Orphanage had a mule. I don't know. Understand them, I guess. Animals make more sense than people." Crawford's expression softened slightly. "How old are you?" 15, sir. "And you're traveling alone? No family?" "No, sir. Been on my own about 3 weeks now, running from something or running to something." Elias met his eyes. "Just running, sir. Didn't seem to be much point staying in one place when nobody wanted me there." The rancher was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would change both their lives. "You got anywhere to be?" "No, sir." "You any good with more than just calming horses? Can you shovel manure, mend fences, do hard work without complaining?" "Yes, sir. I'm a good worker. I don't eat much, and I don't cause trouble." Crawford gestured toward the main house. "My bunkhouse is full, but there's a room above the tack shed. Small, but it's warm and dry. You work for me, help with the horses especially. I'll give you wages, food, and a place to sleep. Trial basis. 1 month. You prove you're worth keeping, we'll talk permanent employment. You cause problems or steal from me, I'll have the sheriff haul you away. Understood?" Elias felt his chest constrict. A real job, a place to stay. It seemed too good to be true, which meant it probably was. There would be a catch, some price he'd have to pay. But looking at Crawford's weathered face, Elias saw something unexpected. The rancher respected what he'd done tonight. "Why?" Elias asked. "Why give me a chance?" "Because you risked your life for a horse that wasn't yours. Because you put that animal's welfare above your own safety." Crawford's voice held quiet conviction. "That tells me more about your character than anything you could say. Now, do we have a deal?" Elias extended his hand, rough from years of hard labor. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." They shook, and in that moment, Elias Webb stopped being a ghost. He became visible, real, someone with value beyond his ability to disappear. The storm raged on, but inside the barn, surrounded by quiet horses, and in the presence of a man willing to give him a chance, Elias felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt hope. Subscribe to our channel to discover whether Elias can prove himself worthy of Crawford's trust, and what happens when his hidden past threatens to destroy the new life he's building. In the next chapter, the orphan must decide between running from his demons or facing them head-on, while learning that family isn't always about blood. Elias woke in his new room above the tack shed to the sound of roosters crowing. For a moment, disoriented by actual walls around him instead of open sky or barn rafters, he panicked. Then memory flooded back. The storm, the stallion, Thomas Crawford's unexpected offer. He sat up quickly, examining the space in morning light. It was small, maybe 10 feet square, with a narrow bed, a wooden chest, and a single window overlooking the corrals. Simple, but cleaner than anywhere he'd slept in months. A set of work clothes lay folded on the chest, sturdy denim and cotton that looked new. A note sat on top in rough handwriting. "Be in the main stable at sunrise. Don't be late." Crawford. Elias dressed quickly, marveling at clothes that actually fit. At the orphanage, everything had been hand-me-downs, either too big or too small. These fit like they'd been made for him. He splashed water on his face from a basin near the window and headed down the external stairs. The ranch was already alive with activity. Ranch hands moved between buildings, carrying equipment, leading horses, going about the complex business of running a large operation. Several glanced at Elias with curiosity, but said nothing. The new kid. The trespasser Crawford had inexplicably hired instead of having arrested. He found Crawford in Midnight's stall, examining the stallion's injuries by daylight. The horse was calmer now, though clearly sore. Long scrapes marked his haunches and shoulders, and he favored his left rear leg slightly. "Morning," Crawford said without looking up. "Doc Patterson came last night after you'd gone to bed. Cleaned and treated these wounds. Says Midnight should make a full recovery, but he needs rest and careful watching for infection. That's your job for the next 2 weeks." Elias stepped forward. "Yes, sir." "What do you need me to do?" Crawford straightened, studying him. 3 times a day. You'll clean these wounds and apply fresh salve. Doc left instructions. You'll walk him gently for 15 minutes morning and evening to keep the leg from stiffening, but no more than that. You'll check his feed and water, keep his stall immaculate, and watch for any signs of fever or distress. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir," Elias said with more confidence than he felt. "Good, because Midnight's not just any horse. He's my breeding stallion. His bloodline goes back 3 generations of champions. Ranchers come from 4 territories to breed their mares to him. If he goes lame or dies from infection, I lose not just a valuable horse, but years of reputation. So you better take this seriously." "I will, sir, I promise." Crawford nodded toward the stall. "Go on then. Introduce yourself properly. Let him get used to you in daylight." Elias entered the stall slowly, speaking softly. "Morning, Midnight. Remember me from last night? I'm Elias. Going to be taking care of you for a while." The stallion's ears pricked forward, and he made a low sound in his throat. Not aggressive, more curious. Elias extended his hand, letting the horse sniff, then gently stroked his neck. The animal leaned into the touch slightly. "He remembers you," Crawford observed. "That's rare. Midnight's usually aggressive with strangers. You got a gift, boy." "My ma used to say I was born understanding animal language," Elias said, then immediately regretted revealing anything personal. But Crawford didn't pry. "Your ma was right. That gift will serve you well here. Now come on, I'll show you the routine." The next 2 weeks were the hardest Elias had ever worked. His days started before dawn and ended after dark. Beyond caring for Midnight, Crawford assigned him every difficult task on the ranch. Mucking stalls, mending miles of fence, breaking ice on water troughs, hauling feed. The work was endless and exhausting, but it was also fair. Crawford pushed everyone hard, himself included. Elias often saw the rancher working alongside his men, never asking them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. And true to his word, Crawford paid Elias actual wages at the end of the first week. Not much, but more money than the boy had ever held at once. The other ranch hands slowly accepted him. There were 6 regulars. Old Pete, the foreman who'd been with Crawford for 20 years. Miguel and Carlos, brothers from Mexico who handled the cattle. Jim, a former cavalry soldier who trained the horses. Sarah, a tough woman in her 30s who could outride any man on the ranch. And Tommy, a kid only a few years older than Elias, who did general labor. They tested him, of course, gave him the worst jobs, watched to see if he'd complain or slack off. Elias kept his head down and worked harder than necessary, determined to prove his worth. Gradually, their skepticism shifted to grudging respect. Midnight thrived under his care. The wounds healed cleanly, with no sign of infection. The stallion's temperament, usually difficult, softened around Elias. The boy could do things with Midnight that even Jim, the experienced trainer, couldn't manage. He could trim the horse's hooves, check his teeth, treat minor injuries, all without restraints or force. It was like they spoke a silent language only they understood. Crawford noticed. Watched Elias work with increasing interest. At the end of the second week, he called the boy to his office in the main house. The office was lined with books and photographs, pictures of horses mostly, champions from various competitions, and one photograph of a younger Crawford with a woman and a small boy, all three smiling. "That's my wife Margaret and my son Daniel," Crawford said, seeing Elias's gaze. "They died 6 years ago. Cholera. Whole town got sick. I survived. They didn't." "I'm sorry, sir." Crawford waved off the sympathy. "Point is, this ranch was supposed to be Daniel's someday. I built it for him, to give him something solid, something that would last. Now he's gone and I'm still here, working for a future that doesn't exist anymore." He sat heavily in his chair. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. When I hired you, it wasn't charity. I don't believe in charity. I believe in earning your place. But watching you these past 2 weeks, seeing how you work, how you handle the horses, especially Midnight, I see potential, real potential." Elias shifted uncomfortably, unsure where this was going. "I'm getting older," Crawford continued. "Ranch needs someone who understands the horses the way I do. Jim's good with training, but he doesn't have the gift. You do, so here's what I'm proposing. You stay on permanently, not just as general labor, but as my horse specialist. You'll work directly with me, learning the breeding program, the bloodlines, how to evaluate quality. I'll teach you everything I know. In exchange, you work hard, stay out of trouble, and commit to being here for at least 2 years. Elias felt his throat tighten. 2 years, a commitment, a future, everything he'd never allowed himself to hope for. But old fears rose immediately. What if he failed? What if Crawford discovered he was damaged, broken, not worth the investment? "I'm an orphan, sir," Elias said quietly. "I've got no education beyond basic reading. I don't know anything about business or breeding programs. What if I can't learn? Can you learn to read better if I give you books?" "Yes, sir." "Can you remember details about bloodlines, birth dates, traits?" "I think so, sir. I remember everything about animals once I meet them." "Can you work harder than you've ever worked before, even when you're tired and sore and want to quit?" "Yes, sir, always have." "Then you'll learn," Crawford said firmly. "Intelligence isn't just book learning. It's paying attention, asking questions, and caring about getting things right. You've got all three. The rest is just practice." "Why me?" Elias asked. "You could hire someone with experience, someone who knows this work already." "Because experience without passion is just going through motions," Crawford replied. "You've got passion. I saw it that night in the storm. You risked your life for a horse you'd never met because you couldn't stand to hear an animal suffer. That's not something you can teach. Either someone cares or they don't. You care. That's worth more than all the experience in the world." Elias felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. "I won't let you down, sir. See that you don't. We start your real education tomorrow. Tonight, come up to the house for dinner. About time you met everyone properly." Dinner at the main house was awkward at first. The ranch hands gathered around a large table while Sarah served food family style. They talked and joked with the ease of people who'd known each other for years. Elias sat quietly, out of place among their camaraderie. But Crawford made a point of including him, asked his opinion on Midnight's recovery, mentioned his plans for Elias's new role. Slowly, the others began to see him differently, not as the charity case or the trespassing orphan, but as someone Crawford valued, someone with a future here. Old Pete, the foreman, told stories about Crawford's early days building the ranch, how he'd started with nothing but determination and a good eye for horses, how he'd built his reputation one careful breeding decision at a time. The pride in Pete's voice was obvious. This ranch was their collective achievement, not just Crawford's. After dinner, Tommy pulled Elias aside on the porch. "Listen," he said quietly. "Boss doesn't do this, doesn't take on apprentices or whatever you want to call it. You're the first since Daniel died. Some of us thought he'd never move past that loss, so whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It's good seeing him invested in something again. I'm just trying to work hard, Elias said. It's more than that, Tommy insisted. You remind him why he built this place. Give him someone to teach. That matters more than you know. That night, lying in his small room, Elias stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything. A month ago, he'd been sleeping in ditches, stealing food to survive, certain his life would be short and meaningless. Now he had a room, a job, a purpose, people who saw value in him. It was terrifying, because having something meant you could lose it. And Elias had lost everything before. His parents to fever when he was 7, his brief stay with an aunt who decided he was too much trouble, the orphanage that saw him as just another mouth to feed. Every time he'd started to feel secure, it had been ripped away. But lying there in the dark, listening to horses moving in the corrals below, Elias made a decision. He could spend his life running from loss, never attaching to anything for fear it would be taken, or he could accept Crawford's offer, throw himself into learning, and build something worth keeping, even if it hurt later. Even if he lost it all again, at least he'd have had it for a while. At least he'd have tried. Tomorrow, his real education would begin, and Elias Webb, orphan and wanderer, would start becoming someone else, someone with skills, knowledge, and a place in the world, someone who mattered. Subscribe to our channel to find out whether Elias can overcome his past and build the future Crawford envisions, or whether old demons will destroy his chance at belonging. In the final chapter, a crisis tests everything he's learned and forces him to choose between safety and the family he's found. 6 months transformed Elias Webb. The skinny, haunted boy who'd arrived in a storm became something else, stronger, more confident, skilled. Crawford proved to be a demanding but patient teacher, drilling him on bloodlines, confirmation, breeding theory. Elias absorbed it all with desperate intensity, staying up late reading Crawford's extensive library of horse journals and breeding records. Midnight became his special project. As the stallion healed completely, they developed an extraordinary bond. Elias could read the horse's moods, anticipate his reactions, calm him when other horses made him aggressive. When breeding season began, Midnight became more manageable, less dangerous, because Elias handled him. The ranch prospered. Word spread about Crawford's skilled young horse handler. Clients who'd been nervous about Midnight's temperament now felt comfortable bringing their mares. Revenue increased. Crawford began talking about expanding, about Elias eventually managing the entire breeding program. But peace never lasted. It arrived on a cold October morning, in the form of a marshal from Helena and a well-dressed woman Elias recognized instantly, Mrs. Pemberton, director of the Sweetwater Orphanage. His blood turned to ice when he saw them riding up. He was in the training corral with a young mare, but abandoned his work and tried to slip away toward the stable. Too late. Crawford was already meeting them at the main house, and Mrs. Pemberton was pointing directly at Elias. "That's him!" she called out. "That's Elias Webb, the boy who ran away from our institution 6 months ago." Elias froze. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab a horse and disappear into the mountains, but his feet wouldn't move. He'd built something here. Running would mean losing it all. Crawford's voice carried across the yard. "Elias, get over here." He walked slowly, feeling every eye on the ranch watching. The other hands had stopped working, sensing drama. When Elias reached Crawford, the rancher's face was unreadable. "This woman says you're a runaway from an orphanage. That true?" "Yes, sir," Elias admitted quietly. "I ran away from Sweetwater 6 months ago." Mrs. Pemberton stepped forward, her face pinched with disapproval. "Mr. Crawford, this boy is property of the territorial orphanage system until he turns 18. He had no right to leave without permission. I'm here to take him back where he belongs." The marshal, a tired-looking man named Wilson, added reluctantly, Law's on her side, Mr. Crawford. Orphans are wards of the state until they're of age. They can't just wander off. Crawford's jaw tightened. He looked at Elias with an expression the boy couldn't decipher. "Why'd you run?" Elias met his eyes. "Because staying meant dying, sir. Not right away, but slowly. They treated us like free labor, hired us out to farms and kept the wages. Fed us enough to survive, but not enough to thrive. Beat us for the smallest infractions. I knew if I stayed until 18, I'd either be dead or so broken I'd wish I was. So I ran." "Those are serious accusations," Mrs. Pemberton said coldly, "and completely false. We provide excellent care within our limited resources. This boy was simply lazy and ungrateful." "Is that so?" Crawford turned his winter blue eyes on her. "Then perhaps you can explain why he's covered in scars. Old ones. Scars that look like whip marks and belt buckles." Elias felt heat rise to his face. Crawford had seen them, obviously, probably that first night when he was soaking wet. But he'd never mentioned them, never asked. Now he was using them as evidence. "Sometimes discipline is necessary," Mrs. Pemberton said defensively. "These children come from rough backgrounds. They need firm guidance. There's discipline and there's abuse," Crawford said quietly, but his voice carried steel. "And I know the difference. So here's what's going to happen. Elias stays here. He's employed by me legally, earning wages, housed properly, and learning a trade. That's what the orphanage is supposed to prepare kids for anyway, right? Productive lives?" "The law doesn't work that way," Marshal Wilson interjected. "He's underage. State has jurisdiction." "Then let's talk about legal custody," Crawford said. "I'm a property owner, a taxpayer, a respected member of this territory. I'm willing to petition for legal guardianship. Give the boy a proper home instead of institutionalization. Surely that's better for everyone, including the state that won't have to feed and house him anymore." Mrs. Pemberton's face turned red. "You can't just steal our wards. We have procedures. I'm not stealing anyone. I'm offering a boy a chance at a real future." "Isn't that what you're supposed to want? What I want is for runaway orphans to face consequences. If we let them think they can just leave whenever they please, we'll have chaos." And there it was, Elias thought bitterly. Not concern for his welfare, but for control, for power over the powerless. Marshal Wilson looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Crawford, even if you file for guardianship, that takes time. Months, probably. And technically, I'm supposed to bring the boy back to Helena today." "Tell you what," Crawford said. "You let him stay here while the paperwork processes. I'll post bond, guarantee he doesn't run. If the court denies my petition, I'll deliver him to Helena myself. But let's at least give the system a chance to do the right thing instead of the convenient thing." The marshal rubbed his face tiredly. "This is irregular. So is a lot of frontier justice. You know me, Wilson. Know I keep my word. Have I ever given you reason to doubt that?" "No, sir, you haven't," the marshal admitted. "All right, I'll allow it. But Mrs. Pemberton, you'll need to agree." The orphanage director looked ready to explode, but she was also smart enough to recognize a fight she couldn't win. Thomas Crawford had reputation and resources. If this went to court, he'd likely prevail, and she'd look heartless in the process. "Fine," she said through clenched teeth. "But when the court denies this ridiculous petition, I expect full cooperation in returning the boy. And Elias," she turned her cold gaze on him, "when you come back, and you will come back, there will be severe consequences for this stunt." After they left, Crawford turned to Elias. "Why didn't you tell me you were a runaway?" Elias couldn't meet his eyes. "Because I thought if you knew, you wouldn't give me a chance. Thought you'd send me back without even listening." "Would have been useful information to have 6 months ago," Crawford said sharply. But his anger seemed directed at the situation, not at Elias. "Now we've got a legal mess to untangle. I'm sorry, sir. I can leave if this causes you trouble." "Don't be stupid. You think I'd go through all this just to send you away?" Crawford's voice softened slightly. "I meant what I said to that marshal. I'm filing for guardianship. Officially. You'll be my ward, until you turn 18. Then you can decide if you want to stay or go." Elias felt his throat close up. "Why would you do that? Because you're good for this ranch, because you've got a gift that shouldn't be wasted, and because," Crawford's voice grew rough with emotion, "I failed my own son. Couldn't save him from disease, but maybe I can save you from a system that treats kids like property. Maybe that counts for something." They stood there in the yard, an unlikely pair. The hard rancher who'd lost his family and the orphan boy who'd never had one, both damaged, both trying to build something from broken pieces. Over the next 3 months, Crawford hired an expensive lawyer from Denver. The guardianship petition was filed with careful documentation of Elias's working conditions, wages, living situation, and Crawford's financial stability. Character witnesses testified, including Old Pete and Jim. Even some of Crawford's clients wrote letters supporting the arrangement. Mrs. Pemberton fought it, of course, brought her own lawyers, argued that precedent would be set, that every orphan would try to run if this succeeded. But the judge, a pragmatic man named Holbrook, seemed more interested in what was best for Elias than in protecting institutional authority. The hearing took place in Helena on a cold December day. Elias wore new clothes Crawford had bought him, his hair neatly trimmed, looking nothing like the half-starved runaway from the storm. He testified clearly about conditions at the orphanage, about the abuse, about his reasons for running. Mrs. Pemberton tried to discredit him, but her own records showed multiple injuries and disciplinary actions that supported his account. Crawford testified about Elias's work ethic, his gift with horses, his potential. "I'm not asking the court to let me exploit this boy," he said firmly. "I'm asking for the right to give him the childhood and education he deserves, to prepare him for a productive life on his own terms, not the orphanage's terms." Judge Holbrook deliberated for only an hour. When he returned, his verdict was clear. Petition for guardianship is granted. "Mr. Crawford, you are now legal guardian of Elias Webb until he reaches majority. I expect regular reports on his education and welfare. This young man has clearly found a good situation, and I see no reason to remove him from it." Mrs. Pemberton's face went rigid with fury, but there was nothing she could do. The law had spoken. Outside the courthouse, Crawford extended his hand formally. "Well, son, looks like you're stuck with me for a few more years." Elias shook it, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Then, impulsively, he hugged the older man. Crawford stiffened in surprise, then slowly returned the embrace. Elias managed to say, "For fighting for me, for seeing something worth keeping." "You made yourself worth keeping," Crawford replied gruffly. "I just gave you the space to do it." They rode back to the ranch together, arriving to find the other hands had organized an impromptu celebration. Someone had baked a cake. Old Pete produced a bottle of whiskey for the adults. Even Midnight seemed to sense the occasion, nickering a greeting when Elias entered his stall. That night, sitting on the porch of the main house, Crawford asked, "So what are you going to do with this second chance I've given you?" Elias looked out at the ranch, at the corrals and stables that had become home. "Learn everything you'll teach me. Build something that lasts. Maybe someday run a breeding program as good as yours and help other kids who've been where I was. Show them there's a way out." Crawford nodded slowly. "That's a good answer. A purpose beyond yourself. That's what makes a man's work meaningful." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Crawford spoke again. "When Daniel died, I thought my purpose died with him. Thought I was just going through motions, maintaining something that didn't matter anymore. But teaching you these past months, watching you grow into this work, it reminded me why I built this ranch in the first place. Not for money or reputation, to create something excellent, something that improves the world in a small way. You did that, sir. This place, these horses, they're extraordinary. They are. And you're part of that now, not just an employee or even a ward. The family I thought I'd lost." Elias felt tears he'd been holding back for months finally escape. "I won't disappoint you. You already haven't," Crawford said simply. Now let's go inside before we both freeze and get too sentimental for practical ranchers. The years that followed proved transformative. Elias thrived under Crawford's mentorship, becoming one of the territory's most skilled horsemen by the time he was 17. His gift with animals, combined with Crawford's systematic knowledge, created something special. The ranch's reputation grew, attracting clients from across the West. But more than professional success, Elias found something he'd lost when his parents died: belonging. The ranch hands became brothers and sister. Crawford became the father he'd needed, and the work itself became a calling, not just a job. He took his education seriously, studying not just horses but business, math, reading everything he could about breeding theory and ranch management. Crawford sent him to agricultural conferences, introduced him to other ranchers, slowly building his network and reputation. By the time Elias turned 18, he was Crawford's full partner in the breeding operation, making decisions and managing the most valuable horses. On his 18th birthday, Crawford called him into the office. They sat across from each other, but now it felt more like colleagues than guardian and ward. "You're legal now," Crawford said. "Can make your own decisions. So I want to be clear. You're free to leave if you want. No hard feelings. You've earned the right to your own path." Elias smiled. "After everything you did to keep me here, you're trying to get rid of me. Just want you to know you have choices, that you're staying because you want to, not because you're obligated." "I want to stay," Elias said firmly. "This is home, your family, and we're building something important here. Why would I leave?" Crawford pulled out a document. "Then I have a proposition. I'm getting older, turning 57 next month. My body doesn't work like it used to, and truthfully, the work doesn't excite me the way it once did. So I'm offering you a partnership, full partnership, 25% of the ranch to start, with the agreement that it increases to 50% over the next 5 years. Eventually, when I'm gone, it all becomes yours." Elias stared at the papers, shock rendering him speechless. "Sir, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's exactly right," Crawford corrected. "You've earned it, more than earned it. This ranch thrives because of your work, your skill, your dedication. And more than that, you've given me purpose again, given me a reason to keep building instead of just maintaining. This place should go to someone who loves it, who'll nurture it, who understands what it means. That's you. What about Daniel? Your son, I mean. This was supposed to be his. Daniel's gone. And while I'll always grieve him, I've learned that legacy isn't about blood. It's about values. You carry the values I wanted to pass to him: integrity, dedication, care for the work itself rather than just profit. You're my son in every way that matters, except biology." Elias felt tears streaming down his face, but this time he didn't try to hide them. "I don't know what to say. Say yes, sign the papers, and then let's get back to work. We've got 3 mares due to foal next month, and Midnight's getting ornery again." Elias signed. And in that moment, the orphan who'd arrived in a storm, who'd rescued a prize stallion and been rescued in turn, became something he'd never imagined possible. He became an owner, a partner, someone with a stake in the future. 5 years later, Thomas Crawford passed away peacefully in his sleep. He was 62 years old, and he died knowing his ranch would continue, that his life's work would be preserved and expanded by someone who understood its value. Elias inherited everything, as promised. He ran the ranch with the same dedication Crawford had taught him, building on that foundation. He expanded the breeding program, introducing new bloodlines while maintaining the quality that had made Crawford Ranch famous. He treated his employees fairly, paying good wages and fostering loyalty. And he started something new, a program that gave jobs to troubled youth, especially orphans, giving them the same chance he'd been given. Midnight lived to be 23, producing some of the finest horses in the territory. When the old stallion finally passed, Elias buried him in a special place on the ranch with a marker that read, "Midnight, The horse that changed everything, because it was true. That storm-filled night when a frightened boy had heard a horse screaming and chosen to help instead of hide, had set everything in motion, had connected two damaged people who'd saved each other. Elias married eventually, to Sarah, the tough ranch hand who'd been there from the beginning. They had 3 children, each taught from early age to respect animals, work hard, and treat people fairly. The youngest, a boy, they named Thomas, honoring the man who'd given Elias a second chance. On quiet evenings, Elias would sit on the porch of the main house, his house now, and think about the journey that had brought him here. From orphaned child to wandering runaway to terrified trespasser to ranch owner, it seemed impossible. Yet it had happened through a combination of chance, courage, and the kindness of a man who'd recognized potential where others saw only problems. He thought about all the kids like he'd been, lost and scared and convinced they were worthless. And he recommitted himself to his youth program, to giving them what Crawford had given him, not charity, but opportunity. Not pity, but respect. Not a handout, but a hand up. One day, a young girl arrived, 15 years old, angry and defiant, caught stealing food in town. The sheriff brought her to Elias, knowing about his program. The girl stood before him with the same defensive posture Elias remembered wearing, her eyes daring him to judge her. "What's your name?" Elias asked gently. "Why do you care?" she shot back. "Because I was you once, scared and alone and sure the world had nothing but cruelty to offer. But someone gave me a chance anyway, and it saved my life." The girl's defensiveness wavered slightly. "What kind of chance? The kind where you work hard, learn valuable skills, and prove to yourself that you're worth something. No strings attached, except honesty and effort. Interested?" She studied him suspiciously. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just an opportunity. You can take it or leave it, but if you take it, you commit. No half measures, no giving up when it gets hard." The girl looked around the ranch, at the horses in the corrals, at the clean buildings and purposeful activity. Then she looked back at Elias, with eyes that held the faintest spark of hope. She said quietly, "I'll try." Elias smiled, remembering a storm-filled night and a choice to help when running would have been easier. "Good. Let's get you settled, and then I'll introduce you to Thunder, Midnight's grandson. He's temperamental, but if you're patient, he'll teach you things about yourself you didn't know." As he led the girl toward the stables, Elias felt Crawford's presence somehow. The old rancher would have approved of this moment, would have recognized it as the legacy continuing, the cycle of rescue and redemption passing to a new generation, because that's what family really was. Not blood, but choice. Not obligation, but love. Not ownership, but partnership. And not one dramatic moment of saving, but 1,000 small decisions to show up, to try, to care, even when it was hard. The orphan who'd rescued the rancher's prize horse had learned the deepest truth. We're all rescuing each other, all the time, in ways large and small, and sometimes the person we save ends up saving us right back. That night, as he'd done every night for 20 years, Elias walked through the stables, checking on each horse. When he reached Thunder's stall, the stallion nickered a greeting, pressing his nose into Elias's hand. The boy in him still marveled at this life, this impossible good fortune. But the man he'd become understood something deeper. It wasn't luck or fortune. It was the result of showing up in the storm, of choosing courage over safety, of accepting help even when pride screamed against it. It was the accumulation of 1,000 right choices, made by him and by Crawford, and by everyone who'd chosen kindness over convenience. And it was just the beginning, because every day brought new chances to rescue and be rescued. New opportunities to see potential where others saw problems, new moments to choose connection over isolation. Elias Webb, orphan and rescuer, rancher and mentor, father and friend, walked back to his house under a blanket of stars. Somewhere in that vast sky, He imagined Thomas Crawford looking down, satisfied that his legacy lived on not in buildings or horses, but in a boy he'd saved who was now saving others. The cycle continued. The rescue persisted, and the storm that had brought them together still echoed through the years, reminding everyone who heard the story that sometimes the worst nights create the best mornings. If you're brave enough to step into the storm when others would hide, if you're kind enough to offer help when it would be easier to walk away, and if you're wise enough to accept rescue when you're too proud to ask for it. Those were the lessons of the orphan and the rancher, and they remained true long after both men were dust, carried forward by every person who chose to live them. Thank you for joining us on Elias's journey from desperate orphan to ranch owner, from to rescuer. If this story of courage, redemption, and the transformative power of seeing someone's potential moved you, subscribe to our channel for more tales from the frontier, where the forgotten become family and second chances change everything. Every story we share celebrates the truth that we all need rescuing sometimes, and that the greatest legacy we can leave is helping someone else find their way home. Don't miss our upcoming narratives of hope, healing, and the revolutionary power of believing in people when the world has given up on them.